We're live. Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Happy Wednesday. We've made it through half the week. Very excited to be here for the Astro-Babble again. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Astro-Babble is where I take random charts that have been donated by you, my lovely followers, and we read them live. We read them cold. So I plug them into my SolarFire Astro software, and we're going to be showing the charts on Facebook as well as the recording of the live stream. But for those of you on Instagram, you'll need to check the replay if you want to actually see visually the charts. But yeah, if you would like to be on the live stream, you can always private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need those three details in order to run an accurate chart. And yeah, if you'd like to learn astrology or work with me privately, you can always go to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, which is my website. And yeah, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Yes, and without further ado, let's go ahead and we'll get to our 5 charts for the morning. So our first chart is going to be Felicia's chart. Good morning, my dear. How are you? Cheers. So we have a Sagittarius ascendant with the North Node in Sagittarius, Neptune in Sagittarius. That's a pretty interesting combination. So right off the bat, and we have other aspects in the chart that we're going to go to, so just kind of follow me for 1 minute. When we see Sagittarius on the ascendant, I know that you've been told that you're a Virgo. However, you know, the Sagittarius ascendant also is a part of the personality that needs to be engaged with, that needs to be respected. And that Sag ascendant being so close to Neptune in Sagittarius and the North Node in Sagittarius, like, you're really learning how to be flexible this time around. You're really learning how to embody that mutable concept of not just your fire energy, but the earth energy of your sun in Virgo. And so, like, if there was just one quick blip that I could kind of talk to you about what your chart is telling me right off the bat, it's about learning how to adapt to adversity, learning how to change your mind, learning how to reset your expectations of the world, and really understand that there are many universes, within thoughts, within truths, right? This go around. That's a very kind of Sagittarius way to approach life in general. But for you, having the North Node in the first house of self really does mean that you're working on developing this type of personality this go around. So I think as a major focus of your life, like, you understanding you is going to be really, really important, and how sensitive and how adaptable you are because of that Neptune in Sagittarius as well. Being physically sensitive, chemically sensitive, the liver being very sensitive to things like sugars and caffeines, chemicals, medicines, all that jazz. Just you understanding how little it takes to shift your position, and that not always being the easiest kind of trait to have, but it is your trait, right? So that's just something to be aware of. What else do we have? So we have a Libra stellium in the chart as well. So the Libra stellium is in the 11th house of friendships, tribes, and social groups, where we have Mars in Libra, the sign of his fall, the MC, Pluto, Mercury in Libra, as well as Uranus in Libra, all in the 11th house. You know, this is tricky because having the sign of balance so forward in the chart with definite kind of planetary stuff, and the MC here, the midheaven, the highest point of the chart, really does tell us that there is a friendship focus, there is a tribe focus, there is a social justice focus in the chart. But I'm afraid that's going to get a little bit drowned out, or I'm afraid that's going to be mischanneled, especially earlier in life. You might lose yourself in those endeavors. Because although we do have Mercury here, who's in an okay spot in the air sign of Libra, we do have Mars in Libra, and Mars is that action-oriented planet who really wants to get things done and go, go, go and move. But having Mars in Libra, the sign of balance, you know, Mars doesn't do balance. Mars prefers to be single-pointed, follow the right path, regardless of if the right path is actually the true right. That's, you know, that's irrelevant to Mars, because Mars is a planet that's dry and firm in his convictions. But to put it in the air sign of Libra, which is all about considering options, you know, that's kind of a catch-22. And having that detrimental planet in your 11th house of friendships and social groups and philanthropic efforts and kind of social justice, it really does kind of pose a question mark in my head of whether or not that area of life is easy for you, or whether or not you've been able to channel those energies effectively. What else? So we have the Sun in Virgo in the 10th, as well as Mercury in Virgo in the 10th, which does give me some really interesting energy to work with when we talk about finances and career and success. So specifically, having the Sun in the 10th really does identify in the charts that the 10th house of success is a place where your ego feels very at home. So you being the center of attention, when the Sun is not doing well, and when you feel like your ego is not being expressed fully, you'll step into that kind of clawing for attention motif that a Sun in Virgo does through its need to be right all the time and its need to organize and the need to do it better. But having the Sun in Virgo in the 10th correctly, co-present with Venus ruling your 6th house of work, Felicia, I really think that speaks to you as an editor. I really think that speaks to you as somebody who understands the idea of perfection in its most practical sense from a career perspective. You would be an excellent editor. You would be an excellent kind of fashion designer who critiques. You would be an excellent critic of all things, really, especially because we have Venus, the planet of beauty, ruling your 6th house of work and present in your 10th house of success. I like that placement. Although Venus is technically in her fall here, or her detriment rather, because she's opposing her exaltation in Pisces, we do have an issue here with this Barbie doll complex, where perfection might be to your detriment in the long run, personally, if you don't understand how to embrace the lusciousness and the goddess-oriented energy of Venus that is truly unconditional love. Virgo conditions Venus. She holds her back, and Virgo being too picky, too perfect, too embracing of that you that will never be really you. Like, it's always putting on the fake layer of superficiality to appease other people in the worst expression of Venus and Virgo. So we need to be careful of channeling that energy properly in the chart. And if it does spiral too out of control, if you do find that your edits become too self-critical as well as too outwardly critical, that might need some remediation as well. But we do have really nice career and editing markers, managerial tasks as well in the career department. I enjoy it. I like it. We always like Venus involved in the work houses because she is a planet that represents abundance. But yeah, we just need to make sure that Virgo isn't dragging her down too much. Having a moon in Leo in the 9th house does give you a flair for spiritual drama. It does give you this idea of your heart being soothed by 9th house topics such as travel, foreigners, higher education, and spirituality. Those are the 4 9th house topics that we associate with that placement. And having the moon in Leo, a sign that is very much about the flair, the glitz, the glam, but also the ability to spot talent and to be talented. The moon in Leo in the 9th does give you a nice kind of fiery edge to complement your Sagittarius ascendant, which I enjoy very much. And also the idea of that sun in the 10th house of success ruling the 9th house of travel, traveling for work, working internationally, working with foreign culture is something that you would naturally find a lot of fulfillment in, but also be very, very good at. So I would seek a position that would expose you to the world, would be a good way to say it, to get you a little bit more out of your comfort zone. And again, work on that adaptability with that North Node and Sag in the 1st house that we talked about. Then we have the ruler of your chart, Jupiter, retrograde in Pisces in the 4th house. So even though Jupiter is retrograde at one of its slowest points in its cycle, we do have Jupiter in his home sign of Pisces, which is lovely. Absolutely adore a good Jupiter, a well-placed Jupiter in Pisces. That Jupiter and Pisces ruling the chart from the fourth house, though, does give you a lot of introvert tendencies, does give you a lot of the homebody nature that I think a lot of people don't necessarily expect from you, because that Sagittarius really comes forward and wants to be spunky, wants to be very much happy-go-lucky and carefree. That kind of fool type energy that we would see in the major arcana of the tarot. But when we see the Lord of the chart in that fourth house, the most private place in the chart, right? In some ways, it's the most hidden place in the chart, our will to be hidden. Yeah, it's our safety zone, right? To have Jupiter here really does mean that you're going to be throwing a lot of your personal prosperity into your home, but it's also going to be the home as sanctuary. Yeah, the home as the safest space. So although career stuff and social justice stuff and friendship stuff and travel stuff will take you away from that home, yeah, we always need to remember that home is really where your heart is in your chart, and that being a very important part of your recuperative dynamic as an individual is returning home, returning to your nest, and really making sure that your home is in order so that you feel in order, regardless of what you're kind of zipping around doing with the other areas of your chart. Excellent. Thank you, Felicia. That is all the chart has to say for right now. I appreciate you donating your chart. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and we'll pull up chart number 2. So we have Alyssa for chart number 2. Very different chart dynamic here. We have still that fire theme. Yeah, the fire theme with an Aries ascendant, which is making a really nice trine, applying to a really nice trine with the moon at 7 degrees of Leo in the 5th house. But we need to talk about the chart ruler first. So we have this Aries ascendant, which gives us this fiery leadership quality to the chart. Really, really nice way to kind of kick off a chart with that cardinal fire energy that pushes people forward, that not only is somewhat competitive, but also very fun and playful when it's properly expressed. The Lord of the chart here is Mars in Gemini retrograde in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, and communication. Not necessarily an ideal spot for Mars, but I do like the Gemini on the 3rd house aspect and the ruler being here. It does give you some really nice, some very quick words. It does give you a flair for language, a flair for writing and teaching and speaking. Charisma is not short in your chart. Like, we have some really good charismatic tendencies, although your words will tend to be a little bit backwards, and you will tend to speak a little bit faster than most people prefer when listening, when teaching, when speaking. That is, if you're actually speaking the truth. We'll get to your Scorpio stellium in a second. But we have this need for you to be involved in the writing, the teaching, the speaking dynamic with the Lord of your chart in the 3rd house. Let's see. Do we want to talk about South Node, Moon, Jupiter, or do we want to talk about stellium in the 8th, or do we want to talk about the pile-up in the 10th? Let's go to the pile-up at the 10th and work clockwise. So we have Saturn in Capricorn up in the 10th house of career. We also have Neptune, as well as Uranus and the MC, all in Capricorn in the 10th house. Success is going to be a topic that haunts you for the rest of your days. It's just something that happens when we have Saturn placed in his home sign. That cardinal energy of Capricorn, who is also leader, but a different kind of leader than Aries. Capricorn and Saturn, especially when well placed in the 10th, really does bring forward this idea of success over time and being the boss. But that climb to the top, that climb of the socioeconomic ladder to the top, will take that precious time as well. So good placement, although we do have some frustration because, that Aries ascendant really wants you to move, to go, to do, to be quick about it. And that Saturn in Capricorn at the 10th of success is like, no, we're playing the long game. We're taking it slow. We're not in need of the rush. Whereas other areas of your life are very much in need of the rush. So we need to balance those two places. let's move on to the Scorpio stellium, because that's really starting to become an interesting dynamic of the chart that I'd like to speak about. So we have Mercury in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio, Pluto in Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio, all in the 8th house of business, death, taxes, and estates. Yeah, it is a very business-oriented house. This house, and to have the ruler of your chart co-ruling Scorpio, we have some very interesting dynamics here that give you a flair for entrepreneurship, that give you an over-identification with 8th house topics of death, taxes, estates, and business. Having Mercury here, as well as ruling your 6th house of work, you'd be an excellent psychologist. You'd be an excellent motivational speaker. Because you as somebody who has your chart ruler ruling both the 3rd house, or the being in the 3rd house of communication and the 8th house of business, like you turning your words for profit, whether that be writing, whether that be teaching or speaking, that's going to be a theme that I'd like you to lean towards career-wise. But a lot of the interesting stuff about having 8th house, prominent 8th house Scorpio placements, with your sun here, Venus, although she's in her fall, and Mercury, we have this really interesting pileup that tells us that, you're going to be dealing with the darker side of life, just in general. That 8th house is naturally going to be a very kind of dark and mysterious place, but to put so much energy planetarily in this spot, you're really going to be exposing kind of the darker side of business, the darker side of life, the topic of death being very prevalent, mortality, facing one's mortality, but also profiting from that mortality, writing about that mortality, teaching about business, all of these things that we would look at a very powerful house that has a lot of your personal planets being ruled by the ruler of your chart. Like there's a lot of ingrained tendencies that I think you are going to expose throughout, especially your career track, that will make it very interesting. But also having so much in the 8th house of death, it wouldn't surprise me if you had mediumship abilities, if you really understood a lot more about death from a practical perspective, because of that hypersensitivity that a sun in Scorpio in the 8th would bring. We have the South Node, Moon, and Jupiter in Leo as well, in the 5th house of children, sexuality, creativity, and parenting. Putting your Moon in Leo here, really interesting move, but we also have some not okay things about this as well. So from a medical perspective, when we see the South Node in the 5th house of children, it does indicate that the childbearing tendencies of the chart are diminished, or there may be complications with pregnancy. Also, when we see the 10th house having the sun, and the sun ruling the 5th house, so the 8th house rather. So the 8th house is the house of death. The sun is present within the 8th and is ruling the 5th house of children. It's a double complication in terms of pregnancy and delivery. So I would really just encourage you to understand that that is a part of your chart. That is a part of the journey that you've signed up for, that you've made abundantly clear that it is something that you would like to experience this go around. And how you remediate that will be your kind of personal business, whether you choose to take the adoption route, because Jupiter is here ruling the 9th. So the Jupiter 9th connection, the 5th house of children, being associated with the 9th house of travel and foreigners, we have this association of adoption within the chart. So I like the idea of things going not necessarily biologically well because of your medical placements, but then also recovering through Jupiter, the most prosperous planet ruling your 9th house of foreigners, and bringing that Jupiterian energy into the 5th house of children through adoption. I really enjoy that dynamic of the chart. Because Saturn rules over things that are legal and law oriented, and we also have Mercury ruling your 6th house of work from the 8th house of estates. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if you eventually went into the practice of law, or adoption law. and worked with your personal experiences to really understand the legal system from a practical, like that's what I really enjoy about your chart, Alyssa, is that there's a lot of practicality in it. There's a lot of, I'm doing this for a reason. There's a very systematic placement of things. Your chart is also very neat and tidy. Like there's a cluster in the 10th, cluster in the 8th, cluster in the 5th, and then ruler in the 3rd, and no funny business about any of that. So I enjoy that practicality, but that doesn't mean that your bumps are going to be smooth. It doesn't mean that you're going to have it easier than anybody else, because even though you've put really nice dignity with this Saturn, even though you've given yourself some very specific skills, you've also signed up for a very nuanced life track that has a lot to do with the climb of the 10th house and the career success that you're going to be achieving long term, the mystery and the death aspects of the 8th house being very, very prominent, as well as estates and legal matters coming forward through that. The 5th house of children having great placements and a lot of really nice, bright, fiery Leo energy, but also complications due to pregnancy, children, and parenting. And then the ruler of your chart in the 3rd, where you're going to be speaking, you're going to be writing, you're going to be teaching about all of these experiences and really sharing what it is you've been through this go around. That makes you such a wonderful individual. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. You do speak fast. Yes, definitely. Exposing things for sure. Yes, lovely. My soul, yes. I love that idea for you as well. Okay, thank you for tuning in, Alyssa. I appreciate you donating your charts to science. Let's go ahead and move on to Rebecca. Rebecca, my dear, good morning. Cheers. Connecting virtually this morning instead of in person. Let's see. Ah, okay. So let's start with your rising. So you have Virgo rising, very close to the moon in Virgo. That's why we get along so well. I'm a sucker for good Virgo placements. Just the order, the meticulousness, the need to be perfect. I resonate with that very, very highly. And that's just always going to be something that that kind of turns your emotional wheels, is like the feng shui of a space. People using correct grammar, that kind of lovely stuff. But also the body. When we have the ascendant and the moon, two very personal planets in the 1st house, it's always a double emphasis on that body system. So the small intestine and the liver being two areas that need your attention, whether that's through, like Virgo really appreciates a nice clean diet, free of preservatives, free of excess. The idea of fasting, also a very Virgo concept. So we need to kind of be aware of that physical tendency in the body. The ruler of your chart is Mercury, who is in Gemini, his favorite sign to be in, well, second only to Virgo. But there's a problem here. There's a problem here for a couple reasons. First, Mercury is retrograde in your chart. So when we have the ruler of your chart being Mercury retrograde, that kind of stifles your action potential in regards to Mercury's gifts. So right off the bat, I think we need to do some Mercury remediation in your chart and honor that energy a little bit more intensely, because there is a great deal of miscommunication. There is a great deal of backwards thinking. There is a great deal of being misunderstood, especially because Mercury is in the 10th house of success. That comes along with having Mercury retrograde as the Lord of your chart. But it's not just Mercury retrograde. We also have Mercury within 7.5 degrees of the sun, meaning that Mercury is also combust. So what this means astrologically and kind of from a visual perspective is we can't see Mercury. So Mercury, who would normally be in the sky, we'd be able to visually see that planet because that planet is within 7 degrees, 7.5 degrees on either side of the sun. That planet is kind of eclipsed, right? So Mercury's qualities are outshone. Yeah. So instead, your ego starts to get involved. the ego starts to compromise your true personality, and we have a little bit of an internal personality war where you have this very authentic, very communicative, very mental, very intellectual energy that tries to come forward, but then your sun in Gemini really says, you know, but I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it and I'm going to play with it like a dog who has a stick that's its favorite, and I'm going to sacrifice all of that kind of really strong intellect for the sake of my ego's fulfillment. And that's not necessarily super ideal when it comes to the intellectual side of Virgo and Gemini. So that's just something to be aware of, that we would need to kind of remediate that, really bring in your conscious mind as opposed to the subconscious ego needs that might derail the chart if let run around too much. And that's also present by a very strong applying square between the sun and the ascendant. So that's kind of where that inner conflict comes from. Like, I need the attention and I need to be recognized for my mental state, but because I need to be recognized, I sacrifice my actual mental potential. Like that, the struggle is real, girl. I feel it. You being the mom friend, North Node in Cancer in the 11th house of friendships, ruled by the moon in the first house, like a serious identification of the need to take care of people. Doesn't necessarily, like, we're not seeing that needing to be a profession. We're not seeing that in connection to the professional houses of the chart, but just the idea that, like, there will always be this piece of you that needs to care for, that needs to cook for, that needs to clean for, that needs to be of service for those that you feel are your tribe, are your people. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind as you're also learning those lessons of how to be a Cancer, in essence, through that North Node placement in the 11th house. Yeah. Now we're going to get into some of the difficult aspects of the chart, my dear. So we have Mars in Libra, who's in the sign of his fall, in mutual reception to Venus in Aries, in the sign of her fall. This is a really interesting placement because they're also straddling the second house of finance and the second house of business, right? To have two planets that represent polar opposite energies in their wrong signs but commingling, yeah, it's a unique placement because it really does say, like, hey, I'm to a certain degree aware of how business and finance works. I do not like it. I do not appreciate it. It tends to take a hold of me in a wrong way, but I get it. We also have Saturn in Libra and Pluto in Libra, both retrograde in the second house of finance. So finance, a very difficult topic, a very strenuous topic, like having both malefics in the second house of finance. Like, finance is going to be a rather tumultuous topic and something that I would definitely surrender to a CPA because it's just not worth your blood pressure getting that high, no matter how much you would like to intellectually understand it. And I get that, I really do. I understand that need to kind of sink your teeth into the topic and to really, like, pull out and extract what you know to be your superior understanding of it. But I'm telling you that you're going to get so heated in the topic of business and finance and so turned around that by the time you're done with it, you're 5 years older and you're emotionally drained and you do it wrong anyway, right? Because somebody else is going to have a better eye for it than you because your planets in those two topics of business as well as finance are not properly placed. So we just need to kind of surrender that fact. Understand that somebody else needs to kind of come between you and how you make money. Because you would definitely make a lot of money in the realm of business, but it's not necessarily your strength. And that's tricky to balance astrologically because you've got good placements, but they seem to be backwards. You've got the ability to succeed, but it's going to be a tough road. And that seems to be the kind of theme of your chart is you've got the Lord of your chart, Mercury in Gemini, retrograde in the 10th, which would be a very intellectual, great business-oriented placement ahead for business, but the ruler is combust in retrograde, right? You do have Mars and Venus in mutual reception, but they're mutual receiving the signs that they hate, right? So it's this kind of energy that we need to learn how to navigate, how to push forward through, and how to surrender control when we are not the best person suited for that job. That's not to say that you wouldn't do well in a financial or business oriented position. Like, you do have that managerial streak that I think comes forward really, really strongly with an exalted Saturn in the second house. But again, it can't be yours. Yeah, it can't be your business. It has to be somebody else's, because that Saturn is retrograde. Like, one of the things that I see a lot is, okay, you're really good at touching other people's work and spinning their straw into gold, but then once you touch your own stuff, it falls apart because you don't have the headspace for it. You don't have the objectivity for it. We do have Jupiter in Scorpio in the third house of writing, teaching, communication. Very, very fun. It does indicate some sibling, and when I say sibling, I also mean like cousin conflict as well. Some secrets, some family secrets that maybe need to be exposed. Especially because that Jupiter is ruling the fourth house of family with retrograde Neptune, retrograde Uranus. There's a lot of backwards movement in the chart that needs to be remediated, but I think kind of the darker aspect of the chart as we descend into some of the more difficult topics is that family dynamic, understanding why it feels so toxic to be a part of your family, why they kept sweeping things under the rug, why they spun these stories, these lies of things that weren't actually true, and how you can kind of recover from that, but also understand that, like, especially as you move forward into your current relationships, the idea of secrets and toxic things being swept under the rug as a theme that needs to be uprooted, that unfortunately you can't logic yourself out of. Like, you need to be able to make action. And one of the ways that you can really make action is by treating your life like a business, and understanding that that's a big part of why you're really here, is to organize and analyze, not necessarily to kind of descend into the muck of other people's charts and other people's lives and other people's energies. Like, if you can't, like, if your compassion is falling on deaf ears, then you're not the right program. Like, you're not the right code for them. Like, your language is different than theirs, and that needs to be respected and pushed away. Because if you don't fit in their life because they have other stuff that's happening, then that's a problem. And you've seen this theme throughout the family dynamic for sure. We just need to make sure that it's not perpetuating and bleeding into other areas of life, because with this Virgo Gemini energy, like, you need things to be crisp, clear, and directly understood. Zero confusion. And unfortunately, confusion abounds with some of these placements. So just be aware of that. Think tidiness, think order, think clean thoughts, and really understand that that's going to be part of the challenge. Cool. Yeah. Good morning. I'm glad you found some clarity in that, Rebecca, my dear. Glad you enjoyed it. Let's go ahead and move on to our fourth chart of the live stream, which is going to be Glenn. Good morning, Glenn. Cheers. Let's take a peek. Aquarius ascendant. Saturn and Taurus in the fourth. Okay. Oh. Yeah, detrimented Venus. Spunky Sagittarius. Sun, Mars really, really close together. Oh, that's tricky. Okay, gotcha. So let's dive in, shall we? So Glenn, let's talk about your ascendant. So you have an Aquarius ascendant, which naturally, Aquarius is the sign of the genius. But depending on how it's channeled, it can either be the reclusive mad scientist that locks themselves up in the tippity top of the tower and just fiddles with scientific experiments and isolates themselves from society, descending every once in a while just for good graces and to like impart the cure for cancer or whatever, like every decade or two. Or it can actually be that Prometheus archetype that comes forward and is constantly sharing their inspiration with the world. And it seems like in your chart specifically, you've decided to be the former, to be very isolating, because you've put the ruler of your chart, this Saturn in Taurus, which frankly is a very stubborn placement. Very stubborn placement. The only way that this placement could be more stubborn is if you turn Saturn retrograde. But here we have the densest, driest, earthiest, most grounded planet in the fixed Earth sign of the zodiac. It's a double Earth placement. It's very, very grounded, way too grounded, very rooted, especially putting that in the fourth house of family. Like you've really decided to cloister yourself in your home would be a good way to say it. And that's been a tendency throughout the life, which again, isn't necessarily super healthy, but it is a tendency that needs to be respected. So that could be like you understanding that your chart needs a little bit more kind of alone time at home and a little bit more rest than other charts need, because you need to recharge those batteries a little bit more. But also that home can be, especially because that Saturn is ruling your 12th house of hidden enemies, like your home can be your own worst enemy. Like it can, that cloistering, that kind of family oriented rootedness, that routine, that day in, day out drudgery can actually be the worst thing for you, because you have other things in your chart that need to be vented, that need to be expressed. And unfortunately, it's not easy to do that when you're kind of locked within your own four walls. It's kind of like that castle becomes a prison type thing. Like Saturn in Taurus, like talk about a sign that can appreciate riches and glamour in under the right circumstances. Like it's really a great rock placement. It really does appreciate value and sturdiness and steadiness, but under the wrong circumstances, again, the house becomes a prison. You know, what's interesting about your chart, Glenn, is you have three very specific placements that are on the edge of their transition periods. You have the moon in Sagittarius at 29 degrees. You have the MC at 28 degrees, and then you have Mars at 29 degrees. It's almost as if like this is something that I see a lot in clients, where it's like, if you wanted to get spiritual with me for 2 seconds, like you reincarnated into this life experience to jump the hedge and to become a new person, and to really understand that like you're on the precipice of the cliff and you're here in this life experience to learn how to push yourself off the edge and fly, right? You're here to really take these 29-degree transitions, because once they hit 30 degrees, they're into the next sign. Like you're here to jump over that gate, and to remind yourself that like, hey, not only is change possible, but change is required, which can be a little bit difficult with that really strict and heavy rock of a Saturn placement down at the bottom of your chart. So that's kind of the juxtaposition of your chart, is like you have all these planets that are right on the edge of change, right on the edge of breaking through to the next level of experience, of development, of personal growth. But then you also have really heavy placements that are kind of holding you back. So that's something that we need to work with. You know, hesitation is definitely a theme in the chart, with Mars and Cancer combust the sun. Really interesting, because we had the same phenomenon happening in the last chart, but with you specifically. So you have the sun in Cancer in the 6th house of work, health, pets, right? And it's a very servant oriented placement. I really enjoy this placement because it's somebody who really lives to please other people. And not necessarily in a toxic way, although it can be, but it's the idea of like, hey, I'm here because I have a need to care for others, and I would really like to use my skills for the benefit of society, right? And I enjoy that very, very much. But we have Mars in Cancer here, and Mars, who is the action-oriented planet in astrology, is in one of his least favorite signs of Cancer, so he's held back in Cancer. Kind of think of Mars the warrior trudging through a really wet swamp. Yeah? So it's slowing that action potential down, but the sun is also very close to Mars and kind of combusting him or hiding him from view. So we have Mars lost in the woods, right? In your sixth house of work. So this means that, it's the perpetual non-fulfillment of what you do for a job. And when you approach work in general, it can really be very self-defeating because you know that you're supposed to be caring for other people, but how you go about that can be really confusing and backwards. To your own detriment and sometimes to the detriment of others. Like the last thing that you want to do is let other people down. Like that is, as somebody who has the sun in Cancer, like I understand that sentiment of like the worst insult that somebody could throw at us is you hurt me. Right? We would die. We would collapse into a puddle of goo and our life would end immediately on the spot. But for you specifically, it's compounded a little bit because we have Mars here who's trying to do the work, who's trying to do a good job, but he can't seem to get ahead. And part of that is because of his own confusion. Part of that is because he cares too much. Yeah. Kind of the warrior with a heart. Like, how can you slay people on the battlefield when you have a heart of gold that doesn't want to hurt anybody? How do you do that? Right? It's tricky because Mars is very non-martial in this placement. So if there was one thing that I might suggest, it would be tapping into that raw kind of fiery masculine energy of Mars and remediating that planet through things that are a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, we would term like macho, a little bit more kind of kick in the ass energy that you need in your chart to kind of push you over the edge. Because again, like if you were born just a day later, that Mars would have transitioned into Leo and would have gotten all the fire and grace that it needed to really perform well. So you kind of need to take that change into your own hands, Glenn, for sure. When it comes to relationship stuff, let's talk a little bit about that because we have Mercury and Leo here, but that whole seventh house of relationships is ruled by your sun in the sixth. So like you going into business with a spouse, that would be something that would really make your heart happy because the ruler of your relationship house is in the sixth house of work. It really does create this nice synergy where you're able to work together with somebody who, because of Mercury being here, somebody who naturally embodies those very intellectual, very savvy, but also very colorful flames of Leo and Mercury, that charismatic kind of curious tendency that you're attracted to. Wrapping that up into a business model would actually make you very happy. So that's just something to kind of be aware of, is you're not just looking for a partner in life, you're looking for a partner in business, somebody who can kind of complement your weaknesses, tell you what to do, tell you what to go, give you the orders that Mars and Sun need in order to perform at their peak. Outwardly, you have a very friendly energy, Glenn. I really like this moon in Sagittarius in the 11th. It's very spunky. It's very charismatic. It really does give you a nice first impression, nice charisma that people are entranced by. Really does give you that kind of happy-go-lucky facade. But also that's how you recharge, is kind of like a good night on the town with friends. Getting out, traveling, also something that really, really inspires you, being exposed to foreign cultures, but especially like you having a 2-hour WhatsApp conversation with your friend on the other end of the world, like that would just fill you up to the nth degree. We do have an interesting mutual reception happening with Neptune in Scorpio retrograde in the 10th house of success with Mars in Cancer. You'd be really good. You'd be really good at professions that. See, now this is where I'm going to get a little bit specific, because the more I see this, the more I'm developing like a pattern in my head, and I'm really seeing something like super clearly. So follow me here. So when we look at astrology as a language of archetypes, right? Mars is the archetype of the warrior, the planet that goes into battle to conquer, and to not only protect the fields and the crops that are his own property, right, but also to defend the people that need defending, especially with that Mars in Cancer. Like you're here fighting for the people that don't necessarily have a chance to fight for themselves. Yeah. But what happens in your chart is you have this reception and this MC trine with the Mars from the 10th house, and it involves Neptune and Scorpio retrograde. Neptune and Scorpio retrograde is arguably one of the most deep, mysterious, toxic formations that we can have in a chart. And the more I see this, the more I think, like, you would do very well working with people with PTSD experiences. Because Neptune, as a planet in the 10th house of success, trining and reception with a planet in your 6th house of career, like, you would do very well working with people who are literally not in their right mind, who are literally kind of sucked into the cave of their own being and can't pull themselves out. You would do very well with, Scorpio and Neptune both ruling over addictions. And like the more I see these placements, the more I'm looking at the story in my head, like warrior lost in the swamp, warrior kills somebody who he doesn't want to kill, warrior then survives the swamp, and then is traumatized by the experience, and you're uniquely qualified to kind of get in there, pull out all that junk, work with the karmic aspect of the chart, and really understand what it means to recover from that deep, dark, watery place and that misappropriated care where it's like, I just wanted to do my job and I did something that I wasn't supposed to. I hurt somebody, like the fear of that Cancer placement. And so now I need to work through that. And like that's having that in your success houses, like you would be uniquely qualified to help people through that experience, as well as the ruler of your chart. Like that's the true purpose of the ruler of your chart. The Saturn and Taurus in the 4th house is you making people feel at home, right? Making them feel safe, being that rock for people when they need it. And I think that because you have this really kind of apex of your chart being so tumultuous, so scary, so full of fear, raw emotion, ambiguity, addiction, substance, fantasy, lost in their own reality, their false perception of what happened versus what actually happened, and then to pull it down into this dense rock of Saturn and Taurus, like you're really the anchor that keeps people from floating away in a sea of their own, I want to say misery, but not just misery, like a sea of their own kind of distorted fantasies. Yeah. Yes, we do have perfectionist tendencies. Yes, we do have other aspects of the chart, but I think that's the nail on the head. I think that's where we need to kind of end the chart, because that's a pretty big topic for us to unpack with that 6th and 10th house placements. Yeah. Okay, we're going to stop there. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you very much for allowing me to unpack your chart. He's napping. I'll show him later. Love it. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, we have one more chart to go through. We're going to talk about Cassius. Cassius, how are you? And just as an FYI, again, if you would like to be a part of the live stream, just private message me your birth date, place, exact birth time. We'll add you to the queue. The list is long. Please be patient. Or if you'd like to schedule a consult one-on-one, you can always go to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. Okay, let's talk about Cassius. Good morning, Cassius. How are you? Dearest heart. Oh my. Oh my. Okay, so we've got some nuances to unpack here. Yes, we do. Oh, indeedy we do. Okay, so we have an ascendant in Cancer here for Cassius, and that automatically means that we're stamped with the sign on our ascendant as a core personality trait. So here we have the maternal archetype. Here we have the soft hearts, the emotional nature, the caregiving tendencies. We also have Mercury in Cancer stationed, so about to go retrograde. So the mind is going to be very, very focused on care. The stomach may also be temperamental, so we need to watch that, because Mercury, from a medical astrology perspective, is the planet that brings hypermobility and unpredictability and tricks into the body system where it's located. And for that to also be about retrograde, very, very slow, we need to be aware of stomach sensitivities for Cassius's chart. The ruler of the chart is the moon in Gemini, but we have a lot happening in Gemini, and it's all in the 12th house, which makes this chart very deep for many, many reasons. So we have an emotional sign ruling the ascendant, right? And the emotional planet connected to that. The emotional planet is in the 12th house. The 12th house, besides the 4th, is one of the most hidden places in the chart scheme. So hiding one's emotions is going to be part of Cassius's dynamic. Not just putting the moon in the 12th, but also it's almost a new moon in Cassius's chart, which means the moon is at her darkest in this chart. So there is like a double hiding, a triple hiding really, because it's a new moon in the 12th house, and is the ruler of the chart. Like it's the idea of emotions being so important, but also the emotions being so tucked away that they're hidden even from Cassius, right? We have the sun here, which does, like the sun being in the 12th house, I never really like to see because it indicates a lot of, let me put it this way. So the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, right? It's also the house of karmic healing. It's also the house of hospitalizations. It's also the house of hospitalizations and recovery. Yeah, also retreats. It's a very spiritual house. It's where people go to kind of cook, right? So to have the ruler of the chart and the sun here, it's a very powerful identification with the role of the attending physician, right? Whether that's a doctor or whether that's the idea of kind of like that Asclepius archetype who's both healer of the body and healer of the psyche. A lot of people with prominent 12th house placements make excellent counselors. Excellent counselors. So that's just something to be aware of, because they often have to fight their own battles. They often have to go through their own shit, and they're able to pull people out of their junk because they've gone through it. So that's one of the blessings of the 12th house, although it is tricky earlier in life. So I would really encourage a lot of emotional intelligence. I really would encourage a lot of emotional vulnerability. I really would encourage a lot of self-development and self-growth in this chart, because it seems like that needs to be pushed early to help give a kind of life rope to pull all of these placements into a sturdier dynamic. Also, the moon and Mercury in mutual reception, I love that, because they are connected, which does mean that, again, with the house being the house of the first, being the body and the self, like there's such an over-identification with the 12th house. It's crazy. So I would research that specifically. It's like at its worst, having all these placements bundled into the 12th house will be kind of Cassius being his own worst enemy. But then also all of these placements being in the 12th house does mean that he's able to hold the torch for others, and really help the healing process on all levels. So I enjoy that. I really do. North Node is also here, kind of adding that to the life's purpose, the life's journey, the hero's journey, very much part of the makeup of this chart. Is that it? What? Okay, so I'm sorry, the chart has gone cold, which is sometimes when I do these readings, it's always fascinating for me, because when we get to the core lesson of a chart, the chart will no longer speak to me. Like it'll just kind of die. Like there are other things that I'm seeing and I know their definitions, but I'm not getting the vibe of the chart. So we're gonna have to end it there. I think that's that's really what I would focus on very much for Cassius, is those lessons. And that's kind of the crux of the chart anyway, depending on how many times we come back to it. That's the real focus here, for sure. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for the Astro-Babble. I very, very much appreciate you. Again, if you would like to be a part of the live streams, you can always submit your birth date, birthplace, and exact birth time to me via private message. That's what I need to run an accurate chart. And then if you would like to learn astrology, if you would like to work one-on-one with me, you can always go to my website. I have a lot of recorded classes on astrology, a lot of Astro 101, medical astrology stuff, as well as you can submit a consultation request to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, and we can work one-on-one to unpack your chart and see what the stars say about you. But until next time, have a fantastic rest of your week, and may the stars be ever in your favor.